A handwritten note was found tucked inside an old backpack at the base of Mount Shasta. The paper was damp and worn, but the words were still clear to read. "The mountain is watching us. We can feel its eyes everywhere. Sarah thinks we should turn back, but Mike says we're almost there." Almost where? None of us can remember what we came here to find. The note was signed with letters that didn't match any missing person reports filed in the area. No one has ever claimed the backpack. Mount Shasta stands alone in Northern California. It rises over 14,000 feet into the sky. Unlike other peaks in the area, this huge volcano sits by itself. It rules the land for hundreds of miles in every direction. Native American tribes saw it as holy ground long before white settlers arrived. The Wintu people called it Bulium Puyuk. This means big mountain. They believed spirits lived in its caves. They warned against climbing too high without proper planning. The mountain's strange rock layers create weird weather. Special clouds often form around its top. These clouds look like floating discs. They hover without moving for hours. These odd cloud shapes have made Mount Shasta a hot spot for UFO fans and spiritual seekers. The area draws thousands of visitors each year. Many come looking for spiritual events. Others hope to see something amazing. But Mount Shasta hides darker secrets than floating clouds and crystal healers would suggest. The mountain has killed more people than most peaks its size. Search and rescue teams report that people disappear here in ways that make no sense. Bodies are found in places that should be impossible to reach. Skilled hikers vanish without leaving any tracks. And sometimes, entire groups simply stop existing. The official records show gaps that raise hard questions. Between 1990 and 2020, over 40 people went missing on Mount Shasta. Of those, fewer than half were ever found. The mountain's huge size and dangerous ground explain some of these losses. Sudden weather changes can trap climbers in deadly conditions within minutes. Hidden cracks and unstable rock faces have claimed many victims over the years. Yet, the numbers don't account for the strange patterns that show up when these cases are looked at closely. Groups that vanish tend to be skilled outdoor people. They're not new hikers who might make basic mistakes. Their gear is often found spread out in places that make no sense given their planned routes. And in several cases, the missing people had lots of wilderness survival training. Local search and rescue leader Janet Martinez has worked the mountain for over 20 years. She's careful about discussing the more unusual parts of her job, but she admits that Mount Shasta presents special challenges. People come here thinking it's just another hiking spot, she explains. They don't realize this mountain has its own personality, weather patterns that form nowhere else, animal behavior that doesn't match what you'd expect, and ground that seems to shift depending on where you're standing. The mountain's history runs deep with strange events. Early settlers reported seeing lights moving across the peak at night. These lights couldn't be explained by campfires or lightning. They moved in patterns that seemed planned. Sometimes, the lights would dance around the summit for hours. Then they would vanish without warning. In the 1800s, stagecoach drivers avoided certain routes near Mount Shasta after dark. They claimed their horses would refuse to travel past specific points. The animals would stop dead in their tracks. They would shake and refuse to move forward. Drivers who forced their horses onward often reported feeling watched by unseen eyes. Some said they heard voices calling from empty valleys. The railroad workers who built tracks through the area in the 1,880 seconds had their own stories. They told of tools that would disappear overnight from locked storage sheds. Work crews would arrive at job sites to find their equipment had been moved during the night. Heavy machinery would be found in places that would require dozens of men to move, yet there were never any signs of human activity. Mining operations in the late 1800s produced even stranger reports. Miners would dig tunnels into the mountain's lower slopes. They often encountered passages that weren't on any maps. These tunnels seemed to go deeper than should be possible. Some miners reported hearing sounds from deep underground. The sounds were like machinery running, but no machinery had ever been brought that far into the mountain. Several mining crews simply vanished while working underground. Their equipment would be found at the tunnel entrance, but the men themselves were never seen again. Company records show that at least 12 miners disappeared this way between 1885 and 1900s. The mining companies eventually abandoned their operations. They claimed the mountain was too dangerous to work. The case that brought Mount Shasta's disappearances into sharp focus began in July 2003. 5 college friends from UC Davis planned a week-long backpacking trip. They wanted to celebrate their graduation. The group had skilled hikers who had tackled hard peaks throughout California. They filed a proper backcountry permit. They gave detailed route information to the ranger station. Tom Nakamura was the group's unofficial leader. He was a geology major who had climbed Mount Shasta twice before. Lisa Martinez studied environmental science. She had spent summers working for the National Park Service. David Rodriguez was an Eagle Scout with lots of wilderness training. Jennifer Walsh had grown up camping with her family. She knew how to handle herself in remote areas. Finally, there was Marcus Thompson. He was a pre-med student who served as the group's first aid expert. Their planned route would take them up the Avalanche Gulch Trail. They would set up a base camp around 10,000 feet. From there, they planned to try for the summit. Then they wanted to explore some of the mountain's lesser-known areas. They packed enough supplies for 7 days. They carried proper cold-weather gear despite the summer season. Mount Shasta's height creates its own weather system. Temperatures can drop below freezing even in July. The group began their hike on a clear Tuesday morning. They checked in at the ranger station. They seemed excited but properly careful. Ranger Patricia Williams remembered them as well prepared. She thought they knew about mountain safety. They asked all the right questions about weather forecasts and route conditions, she later recalled. These weren't new kids taking silly risks. They knew what they were doing. The first 3 days went according to plan. Other hikers saw the group at various points along the standard route. They seemed to be making good progress. They showed no signs of trouble. A climbing party met them at their base camp site on Thursday evening. The 5 friends were cooking dinner. They were talking about their summit attempt planned for the next day. That Thursday night talk would be the last confirmed sighting of any member of the group. When they failed to check out by their scheduled date, the ranger station started search protocols. A helicopter survey of their planned route found their base camp exactly where it should have been, but it was completely empty. The scene at the campsite puzzled investigators. All 5 tents were still standing and properly secured. Food remained in bear-proof containers. Personal belongings were scattered throughout the camp. It looked like the people had simply stepped away for a few minutes. Sleeping bags were neatly arranged inside the tents. There were no signs of struggle or quick departure. Most strangely, the group's climbing gear remained at the campsite. Ropes, harnesses, ice axes, and crampons were all there. If they had tried for the summit as planned, they would have needed most of this equipment. Yet it sat unused, while its owners had apparently vanished into the mountain. The discovery sent chills through the search team. Experienced hikers don't abandon expensive gear without good reason. The equipment represented thousands of dollars of investment. More importantly, it was essential for safe travel on the mountain's upper slopes. Without it, the 5 friends would be defenseless against the harsh conditions above 10,000 feet. Search teams expanded their efforts beyond the planned route. Helicopters covered thousands of square miles of wilderness. Ground crews followed every possible trail and drainage. The searchers found scattered pieces of evidence over the next several days. But these discoveries only deepened the mystery. Lisa's backpack was discovered 3 miles from base camp. It was in a direction that made no sense given their intended route. The pack contained her personal items. It seemed to have been carefully placed rather than dropped. There were no footprints or other signs of human passage in the area around it. The backpack sat on a flat rock as if someone had gently set it there. Inside the backpack, searchers found Lisa's journal and camera. The journal entries were normal for the first few days. She wrote about the weather and wildlife they had seen. She mentioned being excited about reaching the summit. But the final entry was different. The handwriting looked rushed and shaky. "Something is following us," Lisa had written. "We can hear it moving around our camp at night. Tom says it's just animals, but animals don't whisper." The camera's memory card held photos from the first 3 days of their trip. The pictures showed the group looking happy and relaxed. They were making normal progress up the mountain. But the final photos were strange. They showed the same campsite from multiple angles, as if someone had been documenting the area carefully. The last photo was taken at night. It showed only darkness, but there seemed to be shapes moving in the background that couldn't be identified. 2 days later, searchers found David's hiking boots. They sat on a rock formation 4 miles in a different direction. The boots were neatly positioned side by side. It looked like someone had sat down to remove them on purpose. David's socks were still inside, but there was no trace of their owner. The rock formation was in the middle of an open area. There was nowhere David could have gone without leaving tracks. The boots showed no signs of damage or wear beyond normal hiking use. They hadn't been torn off in a struggle. They hadn't been damaged by weather or animals. Someone had simply untied them and placed them carefully on the rock. But why would an experienced hiker remove his boots in the wilderness? And where had David gone without them? Search dogs brought to the area showed strange behavior around the boots. The animals would approach within a few feet. Then they would stop and refuse to go closer. They would whine and back away. Their handlers had never seen such consistent fear responses. Even the most experienced search dogs wouldn't investigate the boots. It was as if they sensed something dangerous that humans couldn't detect. The most disturbing discovery came on the 8th day of searching. Marcus's sleeping bag was found hanging from a tree branch. It was nearly 6 miles from the base camp. The sleeping bag hung 12 feet above the ground. The area had no climbable trees or rock formations. No human could have reached that height without special equipment. Park officials had to use a bucket truck to get it down. They found no explanation for how it had gotten there. The tree itself was perfectly normal. It was a mature pine with a straight trunk and no low branches. Even an expert rock climber couldn't have scaled it without gear. Yet somehow Marcus's sleeping bag had been carefully hung from one of its branches. The bag showed no damage from wind or weather. It looked like it had been placed there recently. Inside the sleeping bag, searchers found a small notebook. It belonged to Marcus and contained notes about the trip. The early entries were normal observations about their route and camping spots, but the final entry was deeply unsettling. "The mountain is alive," Marcus had written. "It knows we're here. It's been moving our things around at night. Jennifer's water bottle was on the other side of camp this morning. She swears she left it in her tent. Tom is starting to believe us now. We all heard the voices last night." Jennifer's journal surfaced after 2 weeks of searching. A day hiker found it near a completely different trailhead. The journal's early entries described the group's first few days in normal detail. She wrote about weather and wildlife. But the handwriting in the last entry looked different. It was more hurried and shaky. "The mountain keeps changing," Jennifer had written. "Trails that were there yesterday are gone today. Tom says we're going in circles, but the GPS shows us moving in straight lines. Something is very wrong here." The journal's final page contained a rough map drawn by hand. It showed their campsite and several landmarks, but the map didn't match the actual geography of the area. It showed valleys where there were ridges. It marked streams that didn't exist. Either Jennifer had become completely confused about their location, or she was seeing a landscape that wasn't really there. Tom himself was never found. Neither was any of his equipment. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist somewhere on the mountain. His family offered a large reward for information, but no useful leads ever came in. Tom had been the most experienced member of the group. If anyone could have survived whatever happened to them, it should have been him. The official investigation concluded that the group had likely become lost and separated in severe weather conditions, A storm system had moved through the area during their planned summit day. It brought high winds and near-zero visibility. Investigators theorized that the 5 friends had scattered in different directions. They were trying to navigate back to safety. This explanation satisfied the formal requirements of closing the case, but it failed to address numerous problems with the evidence. The weather system had been relatively mild by Mount Shasta standards. It lasted only a few hours. All 5 missing hikers were experienced enough to wait out such conditions. They wouldn't abandon their secure base camp. More troubling was the condition and placement of the recovered items. If the group had simply gotten lost in a storm, their belongings should have shown signs of weather damage. They should have looked like they were abandoned in a hurry. Instead, each discovered item seemed to have been placed on purpose. The sleeping bag hanging from the tree branch showed no wear from wind or rain. It had been exposed to the elements for over a week. Local search and rescue teams have their own theories about what happened, but they're careful about sharing them publicly. Off the record, several veteran rescuers suggest that Mount Shasta has strange things happen that can't be easily explained. They can't officially talk about it. They describe finding lost hikers in locations that should be impossible to reach. They find equipment scattered in patterns that suggest something other than human activity. Dr. Robert Hayes worked as a park geologist for 15 years. He believes the mountain's unique rock layers may play a role in these disappearances. Mount Shasta sits on complex volcanic systems, he explains. There are underground chambers and passages that we've never fully mapped. The mountain is basically hollow in places. It has caves and tunnels that could swallow entire groups without a trace. Hayes points to documented cases of experienced cavers who entered known cave systems on Mount Shasta. They were never seen again. The mountain's internal structure is so complex that even high-tech mapping equipment can't provide complete surveys. We might be looking for these missing people in the wrong place entirely, Hayes suggests. They could be miles underground. They could be in chambers we don't even know exist. The mountain's internal structure defies easy understanding. Volcanic activity over millions of years has created a network of caves and tunnels. Some of these passages are large enough to drive trucks through. Others are so narrow that a person would have to crawl. Many connect to form vast underground systems that have never been fully explored. In 1975, a team of professional cavers attempted to map some of Mount Shasta's larger cave systems. They planned a 3-day expedition with full communication equipment. The team included some of the most experienced underground explorers in California. They entered a well-known cave system on the mountain's eastern slope. Radio contact was lost after the first day. A rescue team found their base camp equipment at the cave entrance, but there was no sign of the 4-person exploration team. The cave system was thoroughly searched over the following weeks. Specialized cave rescue experts were brought in from around the country. They found evidence that the team had traveled deeper into the mountain than anyone had gone before. Miles inside the cave system, searchers found abandoned climbing gear. They found food containers and water bottles, but they never found the 4 cavers. The cave system seemed to go on forever. Some passages led to chambers the size of football fields. Others narrowed to cracks that no human could pass through. And some seemed to connect to even larger systems that had never been mapped. The electromagnetic properties of Mount Shasta's mineral deposits create additional complications for search efforts. GPS devices frequently fail to work near certain areas of the mountain. They give false readings or stop working entirely. Radio communications can be disrupted without warning. This leaves search teams temporarily cut off from help. These technical problems make it difficult to conduct systematic searches. They make it hard to maintain accurate records of areas already covered. Several hikers who have survived dangerous situations on Mount Shasta report experiencing confusion that goes beyond typical altitude sickness. They describe feeling drawn towards specific areas of the mountain. It's as if something is pulling them. Some report losing hours or even entire days with no memory of what happened during these periods. An experienced mountaineer named Patricia Gonzalez encountered this phenomenon during a solo climb in 2008. She began her ascent at dawn. She planned to reach the summit by early afternoon. Her next clear memory was waking up at sunset near the base of the mountain. She had no memory of how she had gotten there. Her gear showed signs of heavy use. Her GPS indicated she had covered over 30 miles of terrain, but she had no memory of the previous 10 hours. It wasn't like passing out or getting knocked unconscious, Gonzalez later explained. There was just nothing there, like someone had edited those hours out of my life. I know I was active during that time. My equipment was used and my body felt exhausted, but I can't remember a single moment of it. Gonzalez's GPS device had recorded her movements throughout the missing time period. The data showed her traveling at impossible speeds across terrain that should have taken hours to cross. She had apparently climbed and descended steep rock faces multiple times. She had covered ground that would normally require technical climbing equipment, yet she had no memory of any of it. Her camera's memory card contained dozens of photos taken during the missing hours, but the photos showed landscapes that didn't match any known areas of Mount Shasta. They showed rock formations and vegetation that seemed to belong to a different mountain entirely. Some photos appeared to have been taken inside caves or underground chambers, but Gonzalez had no memory of entering any caves. Similar accounts appear in ranger incident reports dating back decades. People describe starting hikes in one location and finding themselves miles away with no memory of traveling there. Others report meeting fellow hikers who seem normal at first, but later they realize they never saw these people enter or leave the area. In 2012, a family from Oregon reported meeting a helpful hiker on Mount Shasta's lower slopes. The man gave them detailed directions to a scenic overlook. He seemed to know the area very well, but when they reached the overlook, they discovered it didn't exist on any park maps. More disturbing, their photos from that day showed only empty trails. The helpful hiker didn't appear in any of their pictures. The native Wintu people have stories that may offer context for these modern mysteries. Tribal elder Robert Williams shares traditional teachings about Mount Shasta that his grandfather passed down to him. The mountain is alive, Williams explains. It has its own spirit, its own consciousness. Sometimes it chooses people to take inside itself, not as punishment, but because it needs them for some purpose we can't understand. According to Wintu tradition, Mount Shasta exists in multiple dimensions at the same time. What appears to be solid rock to human eyes is actually open to those who know how to see properly. The mountain can open pathways that don't exist in normal space. It allows travel between different levels of reality. These beliefs might sound like ancient stories, but they align surprisingly well with some modern physics theories. Dr. Amanda Foster studies gravitational oddities at Stanford University. She has documented unusual readings around Mount Shasta that suggest local distortions in space-time. The mountain's mass distribution creates gravitational effects that we can measure but don't fully understand. Foster notes, there are areas where our instruments detect density variations that shouldn't exist in normal geology. Foster's research has identified several locations on Mount Shasta where gravitational fields appear to fluctuate without apparent cause. These oddities are subtle but consistent. They create what she describes as bubbles of altered physics. If someone entered one of these areas at the wrong time, they might experience effects that would seem impossible from outside the affected zone, she explains. The gravitational anomalies seem to cluster around areas where disappearances have occurred most frequently. Foster has mapped 12 distinct zones where her instruments record unusual readings. 7 of these zones correspond directly to locations where missing hikers' equipment has been found. The remaining 5 zones have had no reported incidents. But Foster believes this may simply be because fewer people visit those remote areas. The mountain's effects on electronic equipment extend beyond simple malfunctions. Hikers report that their digital cameras sometimes capture images they never took. Cell phones record voice messages in languages the owners don't recognize. GPS devices plot routes through terrain that doesn't exist on any maps. In 2016, a hiking group from Nevada discovered that their smartphones had recorded hours of video footage while secured in their backpacks. The footage showed landscapes that none of the hikers remembered seeing. Some clips appeared to have been filmed underground or in large caves. The hikers insisted they had never entered any caves during their trip, yet their phones had somehow captured detailed footage of vast underground chambers. The video files contained audio tracks that were even more unsettling than the images. Voices could be heard speaking in what sounded like multiple languages. Some of the words seemed to be in English, but they were spoken in such a distorted way that their meaning was unclear. Other voices spoke in tongues that linguistic experts couldn't identify. The disappearances continue to occur with disturbing regularity. In 2015, a family of 4 vanished while camping near the mountain's base. Their RV was found unlocked with dinner still cooking on the stove, but there was no sign of the people. The campground's other visitors reported hearing normal family sounds from the RV until late in the evening, but by morning, the family was gone. The RV's interior showed no signs of struggle or hasty departure. Clothes were neatly folded in drawers. Food was properly stored in the refrigerator. The family's car keys and wallets were still inside. It appeared as if the 4 people had simply vanished from inside their locked recreational vehicle. In 2018, an experienced search and rescue volunteer disappeared during a training exercise. He had been in constant radio contact with his team until the moment he vanished. His last transmission was routine. He was reporting his position and status as normal. Then the radio went dead. Despite being less than a quarter mile from his team, he was never found. The training exercise was taking place in a well-mapped area near Mount Shasta's base. The terrain was relatively easy and familiar to all team members. Weather conditions were perfect. There was no reason for anyone to become lost or injured. Yet within minutes of his last radio call, the volunteer had disappeared completely. Search teams immediately began looking for their missing colleague. They had dogs, helicopters, and dozens of trained searchers. They covered every square foot of the area multiple times, but they found no trace of the missing man. His radio and other equipment were never recovered. It was as if he had simply stepped out of existence. Each new case adds to the growing catalogue of unexplained incidents. But it also deepens the mystery surrounding the mountain's true nature. Traditional search and rescue methods seem inadequate for dealing with phenomena that operate outside normal physical laws. Yet official agencies continue to approach each disappearance as if it were a regular wilderness emergency. The families of the missing deserve better answers than the mountain can apparently provide. Parents and siblings continue to visit Mount Shasta. They hope for some trace of their loved ones. They organize private searches and hire investigators. But the mountain keeps its secrets well protected. Jennifer Walsh's mother, Rebecca, has returned to Mount Shasta every year since 2003. She hikes the same trails her daughter traveled. She carries pictures and asks other visitors if they've seen anything unusual. "I know she's still here somehow," Rebecca says. "This mountain took my daughter. I won't stop looking until I understand why." Rebecca has organized multiple private search expeditions over the years. She has hired professional investigators and psychic consultants. She has offered substantial rewards for any information about her daughter's fate. But Mount Shasta yields no clues about what happened to Jennifer and her friends. The private investigators have uncovered additional strange details about the 2003 disappearance. Witnesses report seeing lights moving across the mountain on the night the group vanished. The lights were too bright and too high to be flashlights or campfires. They moved in coordinated patterns that suggested intelligent control, but no aircraft were scheduled to fly over the area that night. Security cameras at a nearby observatory captured strange electromagnetic readings during the same time period. The instruments recorded energy signatures that didn't match any known natural or artificial sources. The readings suggested some kind of massive electrical discharge occurring somewhere on the mountain, but there were no lightning storms in the area. The authorities have quietly increased safety warnings and permit requirements for backcountry travel on Mount Shasta. Rangers now strongly recommend that hikers travel in larger groups. They suggest carrying multiple forms of emergency communication. But these precautions may be inadequate protection against forces that exist beyond the scope of regular wilderness hazards. Park officials have also installed additional monitoring equipment at key locations around the mountain. Motion sensors and cameras now watch over popular camping areas and trailheads, but the equipment frequently malfunctions or records unexplainable events. Images show lights and shapes that can't be identified. Motion sensors trigger without detecting any visible cause. In 2019, a network of seismic monitors detected unusual underground activity beneath Mount Shasta. The readings suggested massive movements of rock and earth occurring deep within the mountain. But there were no earthquakes or volcanic activity on the surface. The movements seemed to follow patterns that resembled the layout of artificial tunnels, but no mining or construction operations were taking place in the area. The seismic data has been analyzed by geologists from multiple universities. They agree that the readings indicate large-scale structural changes occurring inside the mountain, but they can't explain what might be causing such changes. The patterns don't match any known geological processes. They suggest the presence of vast, hollow spaces that shouldn't exist in a natural mountain formation. Mount Shasta continues to draw thousands of visitors each year. Most complete their trips without incident. The mountain's beauty and spiritual significance overshadow its darker reputation for many people. They come seeking enlightenment or adventure. They're unaware that others have sought the same things and never returned. The tourist industry around Mount Shasta depends on the mountain's mystical reputation. Local businesses sell crystal healing sessions and UFO tours. They market the area as a place where visitors can experience supernatural phenomena. But they don't advertise the fact that some visitors experience more than they bargained for. Gift shops sell books about Mount Shasta's spiritual properties. They offer guided tours to sacred sites and energy vortexes. But the tour guides carefully avoid mentioning the disappearances or the ongoing mysteries. Tourists are encouraged to explore the mountain's mystical side, but they're not told about the very real dangers that may lurk in its shadows. The contrast between Mount Shasta's marketed image and its hidden reality creates a troubling situation. People arrive expecting a safe spiritual retreat. They may encounter something far more dangerous than they were prepared for. The lack of honest information puts visitors at risk, but it also protects the local economy that depends on tourism. Some researchers believe that Mount Shasta's reputation as a spiritual hotspot may actually be connected to its mysterious disappearances. They suggest that whatever force operates on the mountain may be drawn to people seeking transcendent experiences. The mountain may literally be feeding off the psychic energy of spiritual seekers. This theory would explain why so many of the missing people were drawn to Mount Shasta for personal or spiritual reasons. The 5 college friends from 2003 had expressed interest in the mountain's mystical reputation. Other missing hikers had been seeking meditation spots or energy vortexes. They came looking for spiritual transformation. They may have found something they weren't prepared to handle. The handwritten note found in that abandoned backpack remains in the ranger station's evidence locker. No one has ever come forward to claim it or identify the person who wrote it. The paper has been analyzed by forensic experts, but it yields no clues about where it came from. Like so many other pieces of evidence from Mount Shasta, it poses more questions than it answers. Laboratory analysis of the paper revealed some unusual characteristics. The fibers contained trace minerals that don't occur naturally in the Mount Shasta area. The ink showed signs of exposure to intense electromagnetic radiation. But there's no known source for such radiation on the mountain. The note appears to have been written by someone experiencing high levels of stress or fear, but the identity of that person remains unknown. Handwriting experts have compared the note to samples from known missing persons cases, but they haven't found any matches. The writing style suggests an educated person with good language skills, but the content indicates someone who was becoming increasingly confused or frightened. It's possible the note was written by someone who disappeared before they could be reported missing. Somewhere on that massive volcanic peak, answers may exist to the mysteries that have puzzled investigators for decades. The mountain holds the truth about what happened to 5 college friends who simply wanted to celebrate their graduation with an adventure. It knows why experienced hikers vanish without leaving tracks. It knows why equipment appears in impossible locations. But Mount Shasta guards its secrets as carefully as it guards its summit. Those who seek to unlock its mysteries risk becoming mysteries themselves. They risk adding their names to the growing list of people who walked into the mountain's shadow and never walked out. The search continues, driven by families who refuse to accept that their loved ones are simply gone. Each new expedition brings hope that this time will be different, that the mountain will finally reveal what it has taken and why. Until that day comes, Mount Shasta stands watch over Northern California, beautiful and terrible, and utterly silent about the secrets it keeps hidden in its depths. What do you think happened to those 5 friends? Have you ever experienced something unexplained in the wilderness? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more mysteries that defy explanation.